If car shoppers truly liked sedans but just wished they had more practical cargo areas like an SUV, then cars like the Volkswagen Arteon next to me would fly off of dealer lots. But alas, that is not the world we live in. Even with this stunning design and a pragmatic liftback setup in the rear, it just can't lure away people from their Tiguans and Atlases. But with more power added under the hood last year and fewer competitors this year, does the Arteon still deserve a test drive? Up front on this top-of-the-line SEL Premium R-Line, we have full LED headlights, turn signals, and DRLs, but even if you go for a base model, you will get that same setup with adaptive headlights, meaning they will turn in the corners as you steer around. I still think this is the most interesting-looking Volkswagen product on sale today. It has these really cool lines that cut in together and meet at the center of the grille. It really is the most distinctive-looking Volkswagen Group product and one of the most interesting-looking sedans on the road today, no matter the price. In previous years, the Arteon was available in non-R-Line versions, but for 2023, you can only get R-Line specific looks. So the way this front facial looks, that is going to be across the board, whereas before, there was a slightly different version available on lower, non-sporty trims. Now, these wheels are exclusive to the SEL Premium R-Line. They are 20 inches. They are gorgeous and directional. I think they look really sporty and really fill out the wheel wells quite nicely. They're wrapped in 245/35 Continental Pro contact tires. At 191.5 inches long, with a 111.9-inch wheelbase, the Arteon is not necessarily larger than a mid-sized family sedan. Toyota's lineup, the Camry and the Crown, they're both longer than this on the outside, but the inside, especially in the back seat, is going to feel a lot roomier, but I'll get to that in just a moment. Even Honda's Accord and the Acura TLX, they are longer than this, but the Kia Stinger with its rear-wheel drive proportion is actually an inch or so shorter, even though it looks longer because of that longer hood. Now, in the Volkswagen Group family, the Audi A5 Sportback, that's actually going to be also a very similar format to this with that liftback in the rear, but it's a good bit smaller at 187.2 inches long. Unlike all of its competitors in the mainstream space, you will find frameless doors on the Arteon. Out back, we have full LED taillights and turn signals. However, you'll notice the turn signals are not amber. They are going to be red, just like the brake lights. Down the bumper, we have the parking sensors. The front and rear parking sensors are standard on all Arteons, which is pretty nice. And as you can see, this top-of-the-line trim has this black lip spoiler right here. But the overall design is pretty much exactly the same as it was when this car first came out. And I honestly don't think they needed to change anything, so I'm glad that they didn't. Standard active safety features on the Arteon include adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, blind spot monitor with rear cross traffic alert, lane keeping assist with lane departure warning, a traffic sign recognition system, and front and rear parking sensors. The list of optional features, it's pretty short: automatic high beams and a 360-degree surround view camera. For 2022, Volkswagen decided to upgrade the engine and transmission combo in the Arteon, giving it the same power plant as the new Golf R. In that car, you'll find the same 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo that makes 315 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque, but here it's detuned slightly to make 300 horsepower. It's still mated to 4-motion all-wheel drive standard, but now we have the Golf R's 7-speed dual-clutch transmission as opposed to the old 8-speed automatic. The EPA rates this engine at 22 miles per gallon city, 30 highway, and 25 combined. With 300 horsepower standard, this is now more competitive with things like the Nissan Maxima and the base Kia Stinger, but at a similar price, you can get a Toyota Crown or that Kia Stinger with way more power than this. Up front, I think these seats are one of the best in this segment. They are really comfortable and supportive over long road trips, and they're not too firm, which I really like. They're not the most heavily bolstered, so if you're smaller than me, you might feel like you could slide around a little bit more, but if you're a larger person, you will find these to be pretty comfortable compared to some other sporty seats out there. Now, they're 12-way power adjustable on both sides, standard, but we don't have ventilation, only heated seats on even this top model, but we do have 3-person memory settings right here. The steering wheel is heated as standard on all trims, and it tilts and telescopes with a manual adjustment and a good range of motion. The back seat is really roomy as well. It's not as great for headroom, so if you're taller than me, I would say over 6 feet tall, and you try to put your head against the headrest back here, you might start to feel the headliner on your hair, but at 5'9", I still have plenty of room. It's really leg room that counts the most. As you can see, that is where I was just sitting. I've got about 5 to 6, maybe 7 inches of knee room between my knees and the seat backs themselves, and plenty of foot space under the seat as well. I can wiggle my toes around. It's actually a really spacious back seat. The only downside is there's a pretty giant hump here in the middle, so if you do want to sit 3 across, they are going to be straddling this hump here, but we do have air vents and again heated seats back here. no ventilated seats or anything like that, and these are not standard, they are optional. When I do move into the center position, the seat is a little bit higher off the ground, so your head is going to be a little bit closer to that headliner, but Volkswagen did a really good job of carving out the headliner to give you the most amount of space possible, even though we do have the sunroof up here. But in this case, the glass does not slide into the ceiling, it slides up and over onto the outside of the roof, so it doesn't take as much space up in the headliner. If I slide over to the far seat, I can show you the armrest, which if you fold it down, you'll notice the cup holders are in a parallel setup to where you're sitting. So if you have your arm on the edge, you're not going to be covering a cup holder, which I really like, that thoughtful touch. We also do have a ski pass through, so if you do want to keep the second row up but have a long item go through, you can do that. But again, these do fold 60-40 if you want to get the maximum cargo space. In typical Volkswagen fashion, the logo on the rear does double duty as the reverse camera covering and the trigger for the tailgate. So if you push right here, that is what will activate the tailgate to open up. Again, that is standard. And once you do, you have 27.2 cubic feet of space to work with behind the second row. You do get this hard tonneau cover right here, which can be easily removed, and there is a spare tire underneath. Fold down the second row and you get a whopping 56.2 cubic feet of space. That's encroaching on Volkswagen Taos territory. Taking a look around the interior of this top-of-the-line SEL Premium R-Line, this is the optional wide type sunroof. It is not a full panoramic roof, so it doesn't go all the way back to the back. Well, this is very similar to how the Kia Stinger's was. Now here is the height adjustable headrest. It is also adjustable for distance, so you can pop it out like this or push it back into place by pushing this button here and moving it that way. We also have height adjustable belts over there on the side, and these are the black leather seats. They are ventilated because they are heated and ventilated, or I guess you should say they're perforated because they are heated and ventilated. The heating is actually standard, but the ventilation is optional on upper trims, but that's a pretty nice feature. This is black, of course, but you can get a lighter gray two-tone look. Over on the door, what does $51-ish thousand get you? Well, we have a mixture of hard and soft plastics. Up top here, you're going to find some of the harder stuff, then a sort of glossy trim right here with a silver piece above that that looks kind of like carbon fiber. Below this, we have some nice stitching to the padded section here. This is soft to the touch for your elbow, but everything below that is going to be hard plastic. So this isn't sort of ultra luxury. This isn't even really, I would say, Lexus level in certain ways, but at the same time, it's got more of that Audi vibe where, you know, the materials may not be the fanciest, but they have a sporty, sort of solidly built pretense to them. So that is one thing you will know. Everything in here is very solidly screwed together. Nothing rattles, nothing, you know, makes any additional noise. That is something you will find in some of the competitors like that Kia Stinger, which has an interior that after a while can start to rattle a little bit. Over on the door, it's a very clean look to the Harman Kardon speaker over there and how it connects into the air vents on this side. That's all very clean. And on the dashboard here, we have more of that gloss black look with the pseudo carbon fiber trim, and then a glove box that is pretty decent. It's not very deep, but it's got a pretty wide opening. You wouldn't be able to fit a tablet-style computer or just a laptop in general in there. It's just too shallow. And right here is your standard infotainment screen. It's only 8 inches in size, so definitely not the biggest in this segment right now, but we do have a physical volume knob and a physical tune knob, but pretty much everything else on here is touch capacitive. So all these buttons down here on the side, above and below the knobs, those are touch capacitive. They are not physical buttons. This is with the system turned off, but if I want to turn it back on, you just press that, and that will bring all of your stuff back. So I've got wireless Android Auto running right now. That is standard, but you can plug it in, of course, and it works just like any other system that has it. If I go to the media, we can select through a couple different sources. Obviously, you can do voice control, but it's not going to be quite as good as, you know, Google Assistant or even Siri for that matter. And then down here, again, touch capacitive buttons. So if you want to change temperature, you can tap on certain areas of the slider, or you can literally just drag like so, and that will change the temperature. Of course, these are all touch capacitive, so they just take a tap and they work well. They respond to your touch. I'm sure if you have greasy fingers or anything like that, they might be more difficult, but for the most part, I've had no issues with this. I think with the temperature gauge, that should still be a knob, because sometimes if you're driving and you want to do this, this can be a little bit tricky trying to get the precise number you want, but overall, this isn't that bad to use. It's just different. Here's your traditional style shifter with your start-stop right there, as well as the drive mode select button. So you just keep pushing this and that will go through different drive modes. This is what that looks like on the screen. So you can shuffle through sport, custom, eco, comfort, and normal, and the ambient lighting in the interior, which I forgot to mention, that will adjust accordingly. There are some blank buttons, which is a little bit surprising considering this is the top trim. I would like to see all the features available on the Arteon utilized here, or just don't have these here at all. Over on this side, you can automatically park the Arteon, and this is going to turn on your 360 camera and your parking, rear view camera when you have that going. This is a nice spot to put your key in. The key fits perfectly right there. And look, a 12-volt outlet right there. Very old school and kind of cool that Volkswagen keeps that here. You have a shade here to cover up your two pretty large cup holders. And then in here, there is a really small storage area where there's really not much room for anything. You could probably put two small, like pint-sized water bottles or something like that in there at the most. But that's my wallet, and it's already taking up a good portion of the space, as you can see. But you do have two charge ports. These are 45-watt fast USB-C chargers, so really good for charging electronics quickly. Here's the latest steering wheel design from Volkswagen. I think it looks really good and has a cool shape to the center airbag cover. Down here on the far left, you'll see the volume slider. So you just drag your finger across that center bit right there, and you will feel a little bit of haptic feedback. Same with these buttons here. If you want to change the speed of your cruise control setting, you can either tap on the plus or minus, or you can drag across here. Since these are set and reset, those really don't require any dragging, but this button also adjusts your gap in your adaptive cruise control, and this button right here activates the full travel assist, level 1 assistance. So it's not going to be full hands-free driving. It's not level 2. It is still just level 1, but it's going to be more of the enhanced lane keep assist, adaptive cruise, lane keeping, all of that stuff. So if you want that, that's there. If you don't want it, you can just have the regular adaptive cruise system. Also, we have a heated steering wheel. That is standard on all trim levels. Now you do have paddles on the back, so if you want to shift the 7-speed dual clutch transmission, you can do so there. Then here in front of the driver, we have the full digital cockpit pro system. Again, this is standard, so all trims will have this 10.25-inch screen. This current view has the speedometer and the tachometer as dials flanking the map in the middle, but I can change the format by pressing on the view button on the steering wheel. That is going to bring up your full width map. Then I can press it again to give you this view, which is going to show you your distance to empty, your fuel economy, things like that. Press it again, and it's going to give you this view once more. If you're coming from Alex's 2020 review of the Volkswagen Arteon, the two main things to note about this year are the fact that we have more power under the hood and a slightly different set of competitors to consider. Now that we've got this detuned version of the 2-liter 4-cylinder from the Golf R, this thing is properly quick. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission definitely shifts faster than the old 8-speed, but at times it still feels like it hesitates, or it sort of has some sort of lag to get over if you're accelerating from a stop or a crawl. Now, if you're up at speed, it shifts pretty much instantly. It is definitely that old school, well, I guess not old school, but that really traditional or iconic DSG feel you get from Volkswagen dual clutch transmissions. You definitely get that feel here. This transmission also helps this feel more dynamic and sporty than the new Crown, because the Crown only comes with either a 6-speed automatic or a CVT. So this transmission is way more snappy than those transmissions. It is definitely more sporty. Kia Stinger has an 8-speed automatic in its base engine that has the same amount of power as this, 300 horsepower, but that transmission does not shift quite as quick as this, and it is not as visceral feeling. That has definitely more of a lackadaisical feel to it compared to this DSG or this 7-speed dual clutch. In my 0 to 60 testing, it took 5.8 seconds to get to 60 miles per hour. That's a good improvement over the 6.3 it took Alex to do in the same car a couple years ago with the only 268 horsepower it used to have. So that's a good jump, but other people out there have tested it and gotten even faster numbers. So depending on how you launch the car and what kind of conditions you're in, you could see a little bit quicker of a time. But keep in mind, this is about 800 pounds heavier than a Golf R with 15 horsepower less. So it's definitely not going to be as quick as one of those. And dynamically, it is also not going to handle quite as spiritedly, because it just has a lot more weight to carry around. The brakes don't feel as aggressively tuned as the transmission or the engine. The pedal is pretty soft. It doesn't have that sort of sporty European feel you're used to, and it does require a little bit more effort to get this thing from 60 miles per hour back to a stop. It took me 121 feet. One thing that I have noticed this week that is a little bit annoying is the fact that we have an automatic engine start-stop function and an auto brake hold, but unlike other cars where they work together well, if you take your foot off the pedal and let it sit there with the auto brake hold, the engine still comes back on because you've taken your foot off the brake. It's like they don't communicate with each other. They don't know that one is on, the other is working as well. So if you want to do engine start stop, you actually have to turn off the auto brake hold and just hold your foot on the brake pedal, or else the engine will turn back on every time. But the general feeling you get behind the wheel is still that very solid bank fault-like driving experience you get from Volkswagen and Audi. And in my opinion, if you put an Audi driver behind the wheel of this blindfolded, they might have a hard time discerning between this and their more premium branded vehicle. but that was kind of the mission Volkswagen was going with this car. They wanted to see if they could make an almost Audi-like vehicle in a more mainstream branded package with more practicality, and they've definitely done that. But when you consider the price, this is about $51,000. You're right there in the middle of A5 Sportback category pricing. And that's a smaller car for sure, but you're getting the Audi brand. Now for me personally, I would like the larger vehicle on the inside with the, in my opinion, better looking exterior for the same price than the brand name of Audi, if the Audi is not going to give me as much for the money. But most people don't think that way. If they see Audi, they'd rather get the Audi. Plus, these seats are super comfortable and, like I said earlier, very supportive for long drives. So really, this is the ultimate grand touring vehicle with the sporty flair on the side. If you want to drive this spiritedly in the corners, it will actually oblige. The all-wheel drive system does a really good job of helping you pull out of corners, but it doesn't have that sort of, overdrive system going on that you find in something like the Acura TLX. That could be considered a direct competitor to this, very similar in pricing, but of course Acura does have that more middle between luxury and mainstream, that sort of feel to them in terms of the branding, but I would say this is neck and neck in terms of overall experience, and probably a little bit tighter feeling in terms of overall structure and rigidity. The actual ride quality itself strikes a really good balance between comfort and sport. You don't feel brittle when you're in the sport mode because we do have adaptive dampers that allow the suspension to tighten up a little bit. And in sport mode, it never gets, uncomfortable or rough or brittle. But in the comfort setting, it never gets too floaty or soft like an older school Buick or Toyota Avalon. Though this does have the sporty side to it, there is a luxurious side. This cabin is very quiet. I measured 53 decibels at 50 miles per hour, and that is pretty Lexus-like. The wind noise is well kept under control, and road noise, it's pretty typical for what you would find on a 245mm wide tire on 20-inch wheels, but in the general, if you're looking at all the competitors, this is one of the quietest options you'll find. Now the new Toyota Crown, which has 362 horsepower in its top spec, that's going to be faster than this, but it's not going to be as sporty to drive, and it may not be that much more fuel efficient even though it is a hybrid. In fact, I did 33.4 miles per gallon in my typical test loop around the Detroit Metro, which is way above and beyond what I was expecting. The EPA rates this at 30 on the highway, so the fact that I got 33.4 in a mix of city and highway is pretty darn impressive. So the fact that we switched from an 8-speed automatic to this 7-speed dual clutch didn't really cause much of a penalty in fuel economy. And compared to the base Kia Stinger with its 2.5 turbo 4-cylinder, this is way more efficient. Now while the body and the chassis of the Arteon can definitely handle more fun driving in the curves, the steering feel is sort of on the light side. This isn't tuned to be a really heavy-handed steering system. It's still very light and easy. As a matter of fact, I'm in the normal mode right now. I could do this with one finger if I wanted to. So yeah, this is not going to be hardcore in that regard, but in terms of how everything else feels when you do drive it more excitingly, if you will, it's very solid and very buttoned down, very vault-like, and honestly, on a straight highway, it's kind of like having your own bullet train. It tracks a straight line really well, really easily, and it's just super smooth and comfortable. So the Arteon is actually a really likable vehicle. I personally find its styling to be the best in the Volkswagen Group portfolio, outside of something with a 6-figure price tag, of course. But in general, this is a really attractive car that I kept looking back at every time I got out of. It also has that practical cargo area that might make you forget about that small crossover and instead go for this more low-slung and fun-to-drive vehicle. And like most Volkswagens, the structure and chassis are very rigid. They have that very vault-like feel to them. Everything is solidly built together. Everything is screwed together really nicely, at least in my first week of the car. Ownership of Volkswagens can prove to be a little bit different after a while, but in terms of initial perceived quality, I really like the way the Arteon feels. And with the additional power added last year, this finally has competitive numbers. 300 horsepower is about the same you'll find in most of the base engines in the competitive set. Now, this isn't a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid, but it actually is really efficient in the real world. At least up here in Michigan, where the roads are really pretty flat, I got 33 miles per gallon in my highway and city driving test loop, so that's pretty darn good. Now inside, the technology is not exactly as impressive as the price point might indicate. The infotainment screen is on the small side, but they throw in the Digital Cockpit Pro LCD instrument cluster on all 3 trims, which is a nice touch. But then you're missing out on a few features you will find in the competitive set, like front ventilated seats on the top trim. Those were not anywhere to be found. And finally, why is it still so expensive? Now that we don't have a Passat in the United States anymore, the Arteon could have come down in price perhaps to lure more people into the sedan segment. And the fact that, again, it has such a practical cargo area means they really could have owned in on that customer that just doesn't want to sit high up, doesn't want that boxy shape. They want a sedan with almost as much cargo space as something like, again, the Volkswagen Taos. But it's so expensive that I think that is the main turnoff for most buyers. Let's check out the pricing breakdown, shall we? So starting at $44,305 gets you that SE R-Line trim. That is the base version of the Arteon this year. There used to be previous versions that did not have the R-Line treatment and had a lower base price, but they've gotten rid of all of those. You have one configuration that is R-Line, SE, SEL, or SEL Premium, which is what I had, all with the 300 horsepower and the 7-speed dual clutch. Now with the Genesis down at the bottom, as you can see, it starts at $40,525. That gets you the old 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder standard with only about 250 horsepower or so. But in South Korea, they've just announced that that engine is getting replaced by the 2.5-liter that makes 300 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque. The Kia Stinger, which I have mentioned a lot in this video, that has already been killed off here, but it also got that base engine standard. So even if we were still comparing this to the Genesis and the Kia, both of those would have the same amount of standard power, at least theoretically for the Genesis going into the 2024 model year, but the Stinger would have 300 horsepower standard at a lower base price. The Acura TLX, $41,245, and that new Toyota Crown, $41,045. Now, the Toyota has a hybrid system standard and all-wheel drive standard, but that hybrid system is going to be the slowest model here on this list, and possibly the most efficient, but we haven't tested one at home just to see exactly how efficient it is in real-world driving yet, so stay tuned for that. But in general, the Toyota might be the more efficient choice here, because you can also get the top performance version, the Hybrid Max, with 362 horsepower and roughly 28 miles per gallon combined. That's a little bit less than what the EPA rates the Arteon at. The Arteon outperformed its EPA numbers, at least in my testing, so it's possible that the high-performance Crown could do the same thing. But notice at $54,970, you are getting a fully loaded Crown with that 362 horsepower engine. So you have way more performance than the Arteon for a couple $1,000s more. I wouldn't say it feels as solidly built or as rigid as the Volkswagen. It definitely doesn't have that Germanic feel to it. So if you like that, of course, the Crown is not going to be for you, but that could also be said for the other options. The Acura definitely has a very well-engineered feel to it, but the Volkswagen has more of a, a more sturdy feel to it than all of these models. That's just something that Volkswagen does really well, and the Arteon is no different. The TLX and the Genesis can also go over 350 horsepower with the Type S version and the 3.3-liter twin turbo in the Genesis. Those are going to be way more powerful, way faster than any version of the Arteon, though the Arteon does feel much peppier now. It definitely feels like it can keep up with the base engines in this list, and it actually has more power than the Acura or the base Genesis as of right now, as well as the Toyota Crown. But until Genesis brings that base 2.5-liter over and replaces the old 2-liter, you're going to have the most base horsepower in this, at least this competitive set you see here, and that's great. But at the top end, you're not going to get all the same features, you're not going to get all the power. So if that's something you're interested in, there are some competitors that are front-wheel drive based that can do that, but the Genesis is still rear-wheel drive based, so it is going to be the most fun to drive out of all of these, even considering Acura's super handling all-wheel drive option, which is really impressive and can send more power to the back than you might think, but it's still a front-wheel drive based vehicle. In terms of front-wheel drive-based vehicles, I think the Arteon feels the most balanced. The Acura TLX with the Type S configuration can feel a little heavy, and the Toyota Crown with its Hybrid Max powertrain, yes, more powerful, but it doesn't feel as buttoned down or as solid as the Volkswagen. Let me know what you think about all that in the comments section below. Do you like the Arteon as much as I do, and do you wish it was just a little bit less expensive? Maybe around $45,000, $46,000 fully loaded. I think that could certainly help it in the wake of the loss of the Passat. Now you only have Jetta and Arteon in the Volkswagen lineup, and that is a pretty large gap in terms of pricing that I think Volkswagen would be really remiss if they didn't try to fill that in. But we also know the ID.7 is coming, which is technically the full electric sedan replacement for the Passat and potentially the Arteon in the lineup, and it's not going to be really any less expensive than this. If it is, that would be shocking, but at the same time, it's going to be just as practical because it does have a cargo liftback just like the Arteon. It could end up rendering the Arteon obsolete. Unfortunately, I just don't think it looks nearly as good. Make sure to like this video if you are a fan of four-door sedans and subscribe for more detailed car reviews just like this. Make sure to follow us on all of our socials and the Alex on Autos website to see more of the written reviews. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.